Hey, Privyet, Alex. Today I'm going to take a look at Russia and the data which I get from StatsFolio and do an analysis on some predictive analysis for Russia. Russia's still sort of early in the game. They're about a quarter of the way through. It looks like they've crossed their first inflection point with the data that I've seen, and they've done a fairly good job, and the country is cooperating quite well in trying to get rid of this disease. So I'll go over to the data right now, and this is the data from StatsFolio. This is for Russia, the Russian Federation, and we can see that this is a very deceptive graph because these are the new cases. This is each day. This is the number of new cases that are reported each day. And this really is a differential. We can still see it's the same number of people are getting sick every day pretty well. There is a peak here on the 11th of May, and that usually corresponds to what I call the inflection point. Russia's a very, very large country. People are spread out quite a bit, so you've got to get the data in and so forth. So there is probably quite a challenge in getting all the data in. But so far as I've seen, there's nothing wrong with the data that we're seeing. This light blue area shows the number of people who are sick. The green area is the number of people who are recovered, and a small number of red area, which are the number of people who have died. That seems to indicate at this stage of the game that the Russian health system is holding and is working. Down here, as I've said, this graph here is deceptive because you think it's on the way down or it's done. But this is a differential. It's not the actual sort of what's going on, because we come down here and we look at confirmed cases, for example. Deaths, knockoff, recovered, go away. So as we look at this graph here, and we see it from beginning to where we are now, it's still climbing. The number of cases that we have are still climbing, and the one you want to look at is known as active cases, which I keep saying is the graph to look at, because this will go up to some peak and then start to fall. And there have been a number of cases where we've seen it was almost falling here, and then it climbs, almost falling here, and then kind of gets away from you. So I'm taking the inflection point, which was 11th of May, as I mentioned before, which is at this point here, seems to be about a quarter of the way through your first inflection point, and we can make some predictions, not very accurate, and a big leeway and shadow it out and so forth, to be honest about it, but we can make some estimates on what's going to be happening in the future, provided things continue on the way that they are and the way it's been going. So here we have the data from Russia loaded into the analysis package. Now on the right are the confirmed cases. This is on, this says day about 75 with between 25,000 and 30,000 cases. This data took a long time to get through. It's got a long head on it before it starts. On the model, it starts almost immediately and starts to climb. But at about the same amount, this distance here corresponds to about the distance here. This scale, you'll notice, is about twice as big as this scale here. And at this point, a quarter of the way through, we're a little over 25,000. We're a little over 25,000 here at this inflection point, which basically I'll buy, and which means we think this would predict slightly less than 60,000 people of total cases by the time this is over who will be infected. The number of active cases, this is what I'm predicting, that the graph will look something like this. So it will hit roughly about 35,000, but it could be as high as 40,000. We don't know. This is with the data that we have. So I'm estimating it'll hit about 35,000 people. So right now you're at about 25,000. It'll rise to about 35,000, about here somewhere as it goes and it comes through. But I think it's a little early, and I think it may be more than that. I think it may be more than 35,000. So I think I'm a low estimate here. As far as deaths are concerned, the deaths right now are at just over 200, between 200 and 250, probably about 225. And to 52.25. This length of time here corresponds to this length of time, so 50 would correspond to about 40. And this graph is this scale is twice as large as the scale here. So we're at about here for Russia, and it would mean that we would end up with about roughly 1,000 deaths by the time this is over, which for Russia's population means that their hospital system and their medical system has been really working. Now, to show how the growth rate is falling, the growth rate falling is not bad. It's at basically 6% a day. So Russia would start off with about an 85% a day growth rate, and from that time the Russian people have been working at getting it down at about 6% a day of the initial growth rate. That's what this growth rate graph shows, because this is a dynamic model. It's not a static model. So we see that the growth rate will actually fall. It was very high, then low, but of course it's offset by a period of time. And this is just an estimate to see how the growth rate is falling, but it's a very sensitive number. The graph is very sensitive to that number. And the way it's measured, if we go in, we find, where are we? This is the what I call the education rate, or the cooperation rate, is at 6% a day. There's our initial growth rate, which was at 84% a day. So we say the change in the growth rate starting looking on the 18th of May, this is the 19th, so 18th of May, this is number of infected cases versus number of infected cases on the 14th. We get a slope, and we find from there the growth rate right now is about 3% a day. So we expect that that will be reduced by about 6% a day of the 3% a day. Okay, if that helps. And in the middle of beginning of May, it was at about 6% a day. So that's how we calculate that. So it is dying off at 6% a day. All right, moving this over, I would say where we are now with the prediction, I'm saying the initial date starting January 30th or 31st, the first inflection point, which we've measured in, which is 100 days later. It has a very long tail to it. I'm giving that, then I believe the peak date will be at about half of that, and I'm predicting on the 7th month, this is May, June, about July the 1st will be the peak for Russia. The second inflection or crossover point will be on August the 21st, which means we have a final date, because this thing has a long tail on it. It takes a long time to kill it off. Will be about November the 30th. Remember, all these dates should be taken with some sort of grain of salt, but I think it's going to take about that time before it finally dies off. Okay, that's about where we are with Russia. And yeah, that's about where we are with Russia. And I hope, Alex, you stay safe and everybody stays safe, but it looks like the country is working very hard. And I think that my estimates are sort of on the dark side, or on the lengthy side. I think Russia will be able to kill it sooner than that, but please take it with a grain of salt. I would start looking at least till August, September, before you've really got a handle on it, and before we have a significant drop in the number of active cases. And that's what it's going to be taking. Okay, thank you so much.